My guests today are writer-producer Sarah Padbury and director-producer Dave Cabby and their film Izidor. Now, Sarah is a producer, writer, actress, and child advocate, now making her producing debut with Izidor. Now, in 2004, Sarah played a pivotal role in launching Project 1.27, a nonprofit dedicated to equipping foster and adoptive parents. Today, the organization leads a national network collectively supporting 7,000 children each year. A dedicated mother, Sarah has 7 adoptive children and has trained hundreds of foster and adoptive parents. Now, Dave Cabby is a director and producer, and Isidor marks his narrative film directorial debut, building on his 20 years of experience producing, coordinating, and directing a diverse range of multimedia projects. He has collaborated with several major studios, including Paramount and Universal, as well as DreamWorks and Warner Brothers. Now, his filmmaking journey has taken him from interviewing Filipino warlords to documenting genocide in war-torn Iraq and recording the recent atrocities in Ukraine. Now, as a foster child mentor, he gained firsthand insight into the struggles of at-risk youth, further fueling his commitment to impactful storytelling. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome writer-producer Sarah Padbury and director-producer Dave Cabby and their film Izidor to the show. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're very glad to be here.
Well,
Yeah, very glad to be here, Ward.
what a very, very powerful film. But Sarah, I'm going to start off with you because you being an adoptive mother of 7, you have a very unique insight about these children. How did the story of Izidor come to you, and why was this story important to tell?
The film Isidor is based on a childhood event, a real life event in the life of Isidor Ruckel. Isidor was an orphan in communist Romania back during the Ceausescu's era. And I don't know if you remember when the Berlin Wall fell and all those Eastern Bloc countries fell peacefully except Romania. There was a very short revolution and Ceausescu was executed, and the Western press poured in after 24 years of nobody knowing what was going on behind that iron curtain there. And they found tens of thousands of children just warehoused in these horrific, they were called hospitals for irrecoverable children, but we feel like they were more like asylums. There was no heat, no toys, no education. The special needs kids were all thrown together, whether it was a mild thing like a cleft lip and palate or a leg that didn't work in Isidor's case, along with children who had severe mental health issues or severe deformities. So when these kids got exposed to the world, they began mass adoption from Romania, and Isidor was adopted to America. Jump 20 years into the future, and I met Isidor in a coffee shop. And we started connecting. We realized that we had a lot in common, him being an adoptee, and he'd been advocating for his friends that were left behind, and particularly for special needs, vulnerable children, since he was 11 years old and he came here. And the press has followed him for years and years. And so I started working with him as I'm also an orphan advocate and just orphan in a very broad sense of the word. Um,
So,
I'll go ahead.
so when the orphanages in Romania eventually closed, so Isidor comes to America at 11, but what happened to all the other children? And how many of the Romanian orphans were adopted once the Romanian government fell in 1990?
That I don't know for sure. T- uh, tens of tens of thousands, I believe, between Europe and the United States. Um, but most of the kids either they age out and they go to the streets and they just have to fend for themselves, or they literally age out and they're moved into what they call the old man's home, which is like an old folks home. And some of Isidor's friends have literally gone from being in one institution to being in another institution, having never stayed out of an institution their entire lives.
Oh my goodness. Now, Dave, how did your work at the with at-risk youth help you to tell the story of Isidor?
Yeah. So understanding the institutionalized children and what they're going through, and how when they get to a certain age, especially young men, um, because I was working with young men, and mentorship, that they knew, they were very self-aware of the odds that they were going to end up on the street, the odds that they were going to um, not have a normal life like everyone else. And so um, to bring that sort of level of understanding into to Isidore himself, as even though he's 8 years old in our story, he was very self-aware of his place in life, and so we wanted to honor that. And so being a child advocate, helping with children, has really allowed me to um, even give that level of depth and humanity to an 8-year-old kid. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, uh, towards the ending, I'm gonna skip. We're gonna get into the making of this film, but there was something that really shocked me towards the end of the film, of the archived news footage of the orphanages, and being compared to Auschwitz. Uh, did that empower both of you to bring this story forward?
For me, most definitely. Um, you know, we weren't, I was born in 68, so it was after World War II, obviously. But sometimes those stories seem like not real, or they're so hard to relate to. Um, but seeing these kids, I was in college when the footage came out in 1990. I remember this 2020, ABC News 2020 broke the story October 9th, 1990, and I saw it on TV. And I remember just being shocked, like, these are like the pictures we used to see. And then when I was researching Isidor's story, I actually went to his orphanage back in 2016. It was an abandoned building. There were kids' records just strewn everywhere. And it was just shocking and awful to be walking around these places that I had been seeing images of. You know, I'd watched that show dozens of times in my research. And so I could literally find the rooms, find the beds are still there, the curtains are still hanging. And so for it all to be real, and that we can't treat kids like this is just wrong. And so to be able to show it when you're telling people, it's one thing, but to be able to show it in a film is a whole other ball game. And this story encapsulates Isidore's advocacy kind of all in one message, which is for a kid belongs in a family, not an institution. And we show that instead of telling that.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, Dave, because I love the three different styles of cinematography used in this film. There is the animation, then there's that transformative animation into live action. Why did you choose the visuals of the animation and the live action to tell his story?
Yeah, so necessity is the mother of invention there as well. We we couldn't do. You saw this the real footage, and if you go into watching more of the ABC News footage, y- just the kids, the hundreds of kids in various deformities and naked, it's too harsh. And to try to recreate that in real, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, we just couldn't do that, right? And so animation became the tool to do that. And then also, I just, I always loved, like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Mary Poppins, and just the juxtaposition of animation with live action was always, the animated world was the fantastical and wonderful world, and fantasy, and then the real world was dull and dreary. And I liked that we were going to flip that on its head a little bit from a cinematic perspective, and then of course, just the how it obviously shows that he doesn't feel real. He's animated, and then he becomes real when he goes outside, and is shown kindness by a family. and that really makes him feel real. And then with the animation, we wanted to make it as uncomfortable as humanly possible, so we picked a base color that is the worst color to look at. We researched it. There's a, I forget that it's a code of a color. It's like a brownish color, and we use that as our base color for the animation to build off of that. So subliminally, when you're watching it, you just feel so uncomfortable. So there was a lot of different little details we would use in the animation, they're kind of wooden sort of characters. You know, they don't feel really all that right in there. Um, so yeah, that was a from a storytelling perspective and filmmaker perspective, to work with different mediums was so much fun. And um, yeah, so
Well, yeah, because the very beginning, the animation, like you said, it's striking, it's dark, it depicts the harshness of the orphanage and being an orphan in Romania and in these so-called places called hospitals, which they were not because they weren't treating anything and not helping anyone. But then you have, like you said, there's this transformative stage, which I guess I could call it. I guess it's almost like the Pinocchio effect. You have the animation, but he's going to be a live boy. And then, but what I loved, but the difference between the first animation and then that middle ground, the contrasts were very, very striking. And you kind of already answered my question on this because you went to a color palette that was extremely uncomfortable, and that's how I felt when I watched it.
Good. You're not supposed to want to be there.
yeah, yeah,
And but you
We
feel
yeah.
felt it
so
was
you
important. We felt it was important to make the audience go there, though, as opposed to just a storyboard or photos, to really have them have to be and live through what Isidor lived and what he heard in that space, too.
yeah, this I watched the film twice because for for a short film, there is so much to see and absorb and to just allow yourself to get into the story and you don't just feel sorry for Isidore, you feel sorry for the other children because you even have his little friend beside him who has an eye he can't open and it draws you in and you're like, "Oh, will somebody take that boy? Will somebody show that boy love?" Because the demeanor, that feeling, that emotion that you bring forth in his character alone, he is wanting something. He's wanting someone to truly be kind and show him love. And the audience feels that. And,
Mm.
but one of the things that caught my ear, and a lot of people don't really understand that, when they watch this film, they're going to be looking at, oh, this is Romania. This is also the United States.
Right.
Because in the film, Onisha asked the orphanage director about Isidor, about taking Isidor home. But many people may not notice this, but I noticed it right off. He asked her when she mentioned that his right leg was crippled, but then he says, "Is it generic, or was it caused by an accident?" Most people will not actually understand why he asked that. Now, the reason it caught my ear is because my grandmother, many years ago, was the director of the Georgia State Home for Special Needs Kids. Now, back in the day, they didn't call it special needs. So I'm not going to use the
Right.
correct term. I'm just going to say special needs. And this was back in the 1970s, the 1980s. But some of the children were in those homes, or at the institution, I should say, due to physical abuse, and then others were there because of genetics. Why was
Mm.
posing that question so important to the film?
Are you asking me or
Yeah,
Dave?
either one. Either one.
All right.
I just
I
figured
was
you were
waiting on
thinking.
Dave.
That's a writer question there, Sarah. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah, I
that's
guess it is. Um, I- as a writer, I threw it in there because I didn't throw it in there. I was trying to show that the director, one of the first things he says when he comes on screen is that he's new. You know, he's mad, he's on the phone, he's like, how am I supposed to feed these kids on this budget? Obviously, the last person didn't care. Um, and and so when he's presented with this problem that now he has to make this decision about letting this kid go out, which is illegal and dangerous and has never been done before. um, he wants to know as much as he can about this kid. And so it's interesting to me that you really camped on that point because for me it was um, a, a discussion of when the kid was abandoned, really, um, because kids would be if they're born disabled, they're thrown away. That may not be completely fair. It could be just that they parents couldn't take care of them, and the state promised that they would. But then a lot of times the parents would not come and visit. That's why I use that phrase "thrown away." That's how Isidor felt about it. And Isidor was actually born healthy, and he contracted polio from a dirty hospital needle when he was 6 months old. And so he was in a family. He was the second or third born, and he was fine. But then once he caught this, the doctors were like, "We don't know what's wrong with his leg. It just won't move." And then he was just left. So technically, that's an accident, right? And so, because that's how Isidor ended up in that place, um, most of it was probably genetics, but for him, it was an accident. So, most people don't go that deep into it, but because the story doesn't explain all
yeah.
that, but that's
Right,
why.
right.
Well,
Go ahead, Dave.
that scene got rewritten more than any other scene and redone and
Yeah.
redone. And we actually, even though it was animated, we filmed that scene um, and over again. And so are basically used that as our storyboards for our animators to come in and work behind that by filming that scene. And then it was much of a longer scene. And how do you get all this information about what's about to happen? Because that's where all the information is given to the audience, right? And how do you make that feel seamless and real without having to like, you know, make that as natural as possible to get as much information to the audience?
Well,
So
did parents back in the day, did parents in Romania, even if the child was healthy, did some of the families abandon the child and the child ended up in these orphanages?
Sometimes, yes, because Ceausescu had a law that by the time you were 25, you had to have a child, married or not, male or female. And if you didn't, you started getting taxed and extra taxes. And you're supposed to have up to 5 children or more. There were awards the more kids you had. He was trying to build an army. He was inspired by Kim Jong Un and um, I can't remember the other person, but anyway,
Probably Hitler.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So he wanted to build this army, but at the same time, he was exporting all their food. So kids were being born that were um, handicapped and disabled. They used the word handicap back then very common. Actually, they still do. So it's hard. I know we don't use that word today, but when we're talking about the film and the time of the film, we end up using that word. So forgive me.
No, no, that's
But
fine because and it makes a lot of sense because when I heard the statement, it immediately took me back to what all the stories my grandmother would tell me.
mhm.
And knowing here the the some of the children here in the US back in the day, and then to look at the story that you're bringing forth, a true story out of Romania, I could see the similarities between the stories. But then there's this sad moment in the film where Isidor didn't know what the word home meant because his little friend goes, "What's that?" And in Romania, uh, from what you're telling me, many of these children were placed in these orphanages without ever knowing what a real home was like.
Right.
And and I like that you keep coming back to it because it's true. We don't want to make this just about Romania. Or I think that any this could have happened. This it happened to take place in Romania, but this isn't us pointing the finger at Romania. This is there are kids in institutions worldwide today that we need to get them out of these institutions, and that's really the call to action of the film. And it's an international issue. And so we were very aware to try to make this film as much of an international film as possible and honor the Romanians who were doing good. And there were so many, and there still are today,
Mhm.
that are doing incredible things for children. And so we want to, we wanted to be very delicate with that in the story. And I hope that we did achieve that. I think we did.
You did because, the story is basically showing what happened in the past. You clarified at the end with the archived footage of the overthrowing of the government in Romania, and then finding these secret orphanages that no one actually knew about, and then all of the work that both of you are doing. So yeah, we're not putting a bad light on Romania. This is just what happened in the past. We're now in modern day, and thousands and thousands of children are finally getting help that they need. Uh, but in this film, when we go to live action, there is it's so beautiful because Isidor discovers a world he has never seen outside of the orphanage. And you show this when he and his little friend are looking out the window of the orphanage. They see a world like what is it like out there? But then he
Mhm.
gets that one opportunity. He gets to see a horse. He saw the grass, apples on a
Mhm.
tree. He was playing outside and having the feel of freedom, being around other children who were happy and they were loved. So Isidore became that one day to be one of the very few lucky ones. But what I loved, Dave, is that the cinematography in that particular moment, it just shows the true sense of childlike wonder. And then to know that many of these children never got to experience childlike wonder in their life. So it's heartbreaking and hard to understand when you think about the other kids that didn't have that one moment. When when you're working with your cinematographer, what was the idea of capturing that childlike wonder?
Well, first, I'll take it back. Um, the very first hire was Jesper Ankerfalt, our composer. And to really set the tone for, we knew that there wasn't going to be a lot of dialogue. And we knew that we needed to have music. I needed to have music um, to have an understanding of the feeling of the shots that we were going to go get. And then to take the cinematographer out into the world and to try to find the things that maybe we wouldn't notice because we see it every day, but something that a kid's imagination would see. But really, it was he being equipped with just a lovely, beautiful score that Jesper made, original music, and to be able to just sort of have that is in our arsenal as we walked out into the world with the cameras was really important. So yeah, and Romania is a beautiful country, and a lot of those even the some of the drone shots when you back up, that's the Tisa River, and then it's Ukraine on the other side. And so you're looking at the northern border of Romania and the Ukraine, and we shot it on location there. And it's just, yeah, the Carpathian Mountains, it's just stunning. The whole area is called Maramurish. They have some of the most beautiful ornate churches there that have these. massive steeples that are made out of wood, and the carpentry and the artistry is just incredible, and that whole region is just an amazing and beautiful place. So that
You,
helped. It always helps when you know.
oh yeah, location always helps, especially in this case. And one of the things that I noticed, which I think adds to the element of that childlike wonder, is when you're looking at Isidor, you're looking at all the other children, you're looking at all the things that they're doing, and I'm looking at the lighting behind them when they're going through the trees. Um, you see some of the lens flares, and it brings this. You know the look when you see the original Sound of Music. You have
Mhm.
this. You just have this feeling of it's just fresh. It's new. It's clean. It has that. I guess I would call it that 1960s cinema look to it.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
that's what I really loved because even when the husband came, he's got his horse-drawn cart, and it just the colors were the colors were vibrant. There was this special saturation, the coloring that was used, and it flowed so well in all of the live action. I literally enjoyed just sitting there looking at all of those elements in this film because it added to the whole story of a family.
Yeah, we wanted that beauty, and then we even though it's a short film, we needed it to be as long as it was because we wanted you to forget that you're going to go back into this place. We wanted the audience to forget that with Isidore and want Isidore to never have to go back there again. And then, of course, he has his nightmare and he just can't break away from his reality. Um, but yeah, it was really a lot of detail, and our crew was amazing. And Joshua Barbu, our actor that played Isidore, was incredible and just really nailed it every day. And I just to put a camera on that kid is was a joy, to have such a young talented actor to work with. And same with Sarah, working with Sarah as well. And we just had a great cast, a great crew, and everyone brought their A game. And so that really, I I hope, of course, it's my baby, but I hope that it shows in all the little details of the film that we paid attention to.
Well, I
So
loved the actor you chose for Isidore because there was this vulnerability, there was this extreme innocence to his
Mhm.
overall look, and the camera loves him.
yes, it does.
But I have
Yeah.
to ask Sarah, when you actually spoke with the real Isidore, what did you learn about Onisha?
Oh, Onisha changed his life. Just changed his life. I- I- we're careful in the film in this from even the writing the script that we did not want to wrap the story up in a nice little bow like a lot of orphan films do. That's not how trauma works. That's not how real life anywhere works. And so that conversation between Sophia, the mean nanny, and Onisha, we wanted to make that as stark a contrast as possible. And because Isidore has stories about the Sophias of the orphanage, and I've heard lots of them. And I find myself getting riled up and even angry myself at some of those women. But then there's also these wonderful women that starting with Onisha, who knew that they couldn't solve the whole problem with 300 kids that were in that place, but she knew she could do one thing for one day for one kid. And that's the messaging that it boils down to for how you help kids. You have to be able to have courageous kindness. And that's what Isidore would describe Onisha to me as, that someone who was willing to risk and willing to make him as important as he would say a regular child. Like he told me this story one time of he was out with Onisha, and actually I don't know if it was her or maybe another nanny. I think it was her though, and staying overnight. And their kids had been invited to a birthday party, and they went. Isidor went with them, and the family didn't want to let Isidor in. And Onisha said, "Well, if he doesn't go in, then none of us go in because he has every right to be here, just like all the other kids." And so that giving an orphan humanity, that they're a real person, they're not just a black and white photo of a runny nosed kid, that you see somewhere and then you donate money, that these are real human beings that have real feelings and should be treated equally. That's what Onisha did for Isidor. And that's what I wanted to bring to the camera, that to show that he was completely included in this family. Um, and that she had obviously prepared the family for his arrival because they knew his name before he even got there. And she was determined that this kid was going to be treated the same as everybody else. And she didn't know communism was going to fall. She didn't know Isidore would be adopted. She didn't know he'd grow up to be an advocate. She didn't know any of that. You know, all she knew was she was risking her family's safety by bringing this kid home, but she thought he was worth it. And that
Well, did
is
she bring other kids home when she worked at the
eventually she
orphanage?
did. Eventually, Christina, the little friend that he has, that's a real person. Her name's Christina, and she is lives in San Diego. She was adopted as well. They were best friends at the orphanage, and she's one of the kids that he advocated for once he got here to get out. Um, and she is actually a Special Olympian. She's a silver and gold medalist in swimming. So you just never know what capacity kids can grow to if they're just given a chance.
You just put the thought in my head to think, to literally imagine the kids in the orphanage. People don't realize that could be a future president, that could be a future doctor,
Right?
a lawyer, an athlete, an advocate for a cause. And oh my goodness, you make me want to tear up because this film is so good. It's so powerful. And when I first looked at the film, I didn't actually know that it would be a social impact film, but it is, because this is a film. And like you said, Dave, this isn't just about Romanian children. This is about children all over the world who need to know what a home is like. And that's what I love about the home scene. Oh my gosh. Y'all could not have chosen a better actor to play the father. I just loved him. I mean, how did you cast this film? So that would be a great question for you.
Yeah, again, um, we just were so blessed. In the we went to Romania. It was basically Sarah and I and Isidore, and we needed to cast the film, and so we went through many different stages of what you would normally do for casting, and then we reached out into the artistic community in Romania, and then we went and visited an orphanage in Timișoara, and the dad at the orphanage, when I showed up there, he wanted to start telling me jokes. He had English jokes, and he was so fun. And he was like my father and me, and I laugh at my own jokes. I have a it's a problem, but I laugh at my own jokes, and he was laughing at his own jokes, and I thought this guy is awesome. And so I asked him, I was like, would you mind playing the dad and telling this joke, because we needed to bring in some levity into the film, and the big mouth frog joke was a joke my father used to tell all the time to kids, and so it was sort of an homage to my dad, but also because he was such a jovial, wonderful, happy guy, and he takes care of 27 kids, orphan kids, and he's an amazing human being, and so to be able to cast him in the film, work with him as an actor wasn't it wasn't a far stretch because it was who he was. So
Wow. I am
yeah,
so impressed because I love when I get to see films, especially short films, where, and I've seen short films where the whole cast has never acted before. And when you see the finished product, you would never know that they had never acted before. But I just loved him in this film because when he is telling that joke, I love how animated he is and that all the children are hanging on every word.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And they were.
they were.
Yeah, and he holds court. I'm sure at his home, and gets to tell his jokes to his captive audience.
And
Oh,
the youngest little boy who was sitting on his knee playing his son, he doesn't speak English. And he was literally just laughing. And that's also his bio son, his biological son. And he was just laughing at his dad's antics so hard, obviously. Um, and so
Yeah,
it's pretty funny to think that he didn't really even understand what was going on. It was just funny to him.
yeah, it's an absolute beautiful scene. And I want to go back to, I guess you could call it the field or the meadow, where Isidor, he's doing, I would say snow angels, but he's doing it in the grass. And to realize that maybe a child has never touched grass or laid down in the grass, and then to see that look on his face when he picks the apple from the tree, and to have a taste of a food that is not porridge from an orphanage, that he tasted
yeah,
something that's alive, because now he's outside and he's getting to be alive at the same time. Um, that whole sequence outside is absolutely beautiful. I think it's one of my favorite parts of the film because he was free. Now, when Isidor was taken home for the first time by Onisha, did she ever, in real life, was she ever able to take him out of the orphanage more than once?
She was. Yes, once communism fell, especially, and that director who was new, that's based on a real person as well. His name is VRL Leodian, and he got rid of a lot of the mean nannies and hired a whole new set of nannies. And Isidor calls them the Seven Angels, and they actually got some training because a lot of these. In, in in some ways you can't completely hold accountable the nannies who were cruel to the children because they had no training. They were just thrown into here. They didn't know what to do. They were given shots. If a kid acts up, you just drug them up, or whatever. And so that's all they knew how to do. But Viorel got rid of all those people. He brought in outsiders from other countries to train on childcare. And that place started turning around even before Isidor was adopted and left. He pulled out some of the kids that had more mental capacities, like Isidor did, and he put them on their own floor, and they started getting a little bit of education. So he was someone who really changed things there. And then he allowed more after that first time with Onisha. He allowed other nannies to take some of the children home as well.
And
So
this
Isidore
was
and Chris,
and this was
go ahead.
all before the fall of Romania.
Um, the going home was before the fall of Romania. Um, so it would have been pre 19 Christmas Day 1989 is when Ceausescu was executed. But the real freedom came after that, when more kids were allowed to start going home, and they started the new floor and started getting education. And VRL started getting outside resources.
In the film, you go back to the dark animation, and that redheaded nurse says, "And you think I'm the cruel one?" I mean, in her mind, she thought it was cruel to allow Isidor or any child to experience a better life outside the orphanage, even if it was just for one night, and then having to go back to the horrible orphanage. I understood her point,
Mhm.
but we learned that one act of love from Onisha was the hope that Isidor needed, correct?
Right. And there's a saying that's true that's called when helping hurts and you do it the wrong way, sort of a thing, and you don't um you help too much and then it can actually hurt the people you're trying to help. But the far bigger problem, and we didn't wrap that up. We didn't answer that question. We want people to debate that. You know, when is it too much? What should you do? And our experience as people, Isidore, David, our experience is that far more people do nothing than do too much because having courageous kindness requires risk. You don't know the outcome. And so you have to be willing. Most of us only want to take action if we know how things are going to turn out. We're very transactional in our willingness to share ourselves, our lives, our money. And helping helping a vulnerable child isn't about, you cannot guarantee an outcome. It's a human being.
Well, yeah,
So,
it's a step of faith, and if you don't take the step of
right,
faith, you're never going to know that what you're doing is going to come out good. And I think the chances of it coming out good far outweigh if it was ever going to be bad. So when the redheaded nurse made the statement, I disagreed with her because I was like, I would
huh?
rather give him one day, one night, because in my mind it was, if he never got the chance again, the seed has already been planted. He now knows, and it gives him hope. Maybe it would be another year, maybe it was 2 years, but at least he now knows what to dream for. And I would rather implant a dream than not give him a dream at all.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave, how
And
long? How long did it? Oh no, go ahead, Dave.
no, sorry, you go ahead.
Well, how long did it take you to do the whole film, filming wise?
Oh gosh. Well, we filmed in one week in Romania the first time we came back, and we shot for another 4 days, and then the animation was a whole different ball game
Mhm.
for so that took quite a bit more significant more time to do.
Yeah, months,
So
right?
Years.
yeah, a years. So yeah, it took time. Our technical animator, John Kujawa, who is a technical director over at South Park, we devised a plan to. We knew that a certain look, and then we knew that there were going to be certain AI tools that were coming out that hadn't really come out yet, but we knew that we could use some of them, but it would be to only help us with the process of the animation of animation with the traditional tools. And so we were at the cutting edge of different AI tools that helped in the process to get us across the finish line without having to, have a Pixar budget and have like 15 animators, so it was really helping us to cut corners more than it was anything else. And so we just, we had to do what we had to do to make it look the way it did, and achieve this that style, I guess you could say. But that took
But is
over a
it?
year.
And this is a dumb question, but animation's expensive. Why did you go that route with this film?
Yeah, it when Sarah and I talked about it, and knowing that it was going to be exceedingly expensive, and when Sarah said, let's just do it, let's just do the animation and we'll figure it out, and that gave me the confidence to go and make it happen. So it really was a bunch of discussions, and when you're looking at what a story needs, and then when once you we came up with the idea, we couldn't not do it that way. It had to be done that way. And so then it was okay, well now let's go get the resources and make this thing happen. Because I can never see it without animation, you know. Um,
Yeah, I've said this time and time again. Filmmaking is part magic and the other side is part miracle. Because either side, it takes a lot of faith to pull off a film, regardless what type of tools you plan on using to tell the story. And I'm trying to think, this may be only the second or third film that I've ever seen where animation and live action is used together. And it's not easy to do, but I commend you for creating a story that shows us that we need to be far more aware of the humanity around us and not to be caught up in our own easy lives per se, and to also realize that there are those out there that are like these children. And I've done interviews about adoption and people, I think there are millions of people, millions of couples out there that would adopt in a heartbeat. And it's films like this, I think, will fuel that. And so with this film, Isidor, what has been the overall reaction at the film festivals?
Just last week, Isidor and I went to the Cleveland International Film Festival, and we got amazing reactions. Everybody was they particularly loved the animation, like you talked about, and the transition. A couple of people mentioned the sound design during the animation, how it shocked them. Without giving too much away, you really get to experience what Isidor experiences. Um, and they also mentioned the coloring. Dave did the hyper coloring of the real life world to make it even more just shocking. And I'm probably not using the right film word for hypercoloring, but
that's
it's why
okay.
he's the
Just,
director.
yeah, just say
So,
coloring. I know what you're talking about.
Okay. Hyper realistic. That's what I was trying to say.
Oh,
Um, but um, yeah, so I feel very satisfied, very excited about people's response. And one of the reasons we love that this is a 30-minute film is because we intend to use it for advocacy. And it almost demands a conversation afterward. When we were doing private screenings before we hit the film festival circuit, both Dave and I, we were showing them in different circles in different states, and every time there would be at least an hour conversation afterward. What does it mean? What do I need? How does this affect me? How does this relate to me? And so we have plans. We're actually writing discussion guides with the help of a PhD in psychology out of USC to address different types of audiences that can use this, be it for advocacy or recruitment or training. Imagine an adoptee support group watching this film and then discussing it. That's a completely different discussion than, say, a nonprofit that's trying to do advocacy work somewhere else, and they can use it as a launch for an initiative and have a discussion afterward. So we think it's the perfect length for that kind of a advocacy, and we're really excited about that. This film's going to live on a long time. It has a lot of work to do in the world.
yeah, and that's the thing about films like this. They have a much longer shelf life, and this is one reason why social impact films are so important. They have a much longer shelf life than just saying, "Oh, the film went through the film festival circuit for the year. Now it's over. I'm moving on to the next project." Social impact films don't do that. They keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen films from, oh gosh, let me see, late 2023 that are still out there making an impact in the areas of the social realm. And this is one of those films. And I have to give kudos to the Cleveland International Film Festival here, because to have a classified short film at 30 minutes, a lot of film festivals look the other way. So I
Right.
Yep.
commend Cleveland of accepting this film so it can be seen by so many people. And I pray that many other film festivals out there across the globe pick this film up to show it, because
Thank
it's
you.
extremely important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, Dave, I want to ask you something, because there's this beautiful clip in that film when Isidor is with Onisha, and they step. It's that first moment they step outside the gate at the orphanage, and he looks at his hand. Why was that so important in this film?
Good question. No one's asked me that question before. I
Hmm.
I wanted the experience for Isidore, the audience to feel like they were Isidore, looking at their own hands. What would you do if your world just changed? And so I wanted the self-realization that he knows that he's no longer animated. And that's what looking at the hands does. It makes him self-aware. And I think Sarah wrote a couple of different versions of that, but then we went back to just the showing of the hands. And that's really how we wanted, like I said, for him to give more credit to Isidore, the boy who is experiencing this, and he knows what he's experiencing.
When I saw that
So
scene, my first thought was he's feeling his first sense of freedom outside the dark, drab walls of the orphanage. He's outside, there's color, there is life. He can feel the wind blowing. And
Hmm.
it's almost like his hand is taking all of that in. He's able to touch life. He's able to actually touch the dream that he could only see from the window.
Mm.
And then
I
have to
love it.
look beyond the wall, look beyond the gate. And now he's like, this is what it's like. And
Hmm.
so I loved that moment of transition in this film. Now, what was when Isidore himself, he's an adult now, what was his overall reaction when he first saw the film for the very first time?
I showed it to him and his parents at the same time. I flew to Texas and we put it on their big screen TV and showed it to them. And I think he just sat there in silence for a minute and then he finally said, "Wow." Um, he really loves it. He really loves it. And he was there on set when we shot, and he had a lot to do with making sure that the set design and the costuming was all period correct. That was very important to him. And it was important to us too because we wanted to really transport people there. So he was up and involved in producing the whole time we were in Romania. And but we didn't let him see the final product until we were all done. So he's very happy with it.
I
Yeah.
love now. Does he go with y'all to the film festivals when it's shown?
He did. He and I went to Cleveland last week together. Dave's in Europe right now, so he couldn't go. But yes, so Izidor and I went together and represented, and he loved going around and getting using his phone to go and get people's reactions after the movie. So we'll be putting up a whole bunch of clips about what people thought of the movie, their first reactions, and that kind of thing. So he's very invested and really is excited to go. We're going to go to Romania this summer for about 2.5 weeks, and we're going to show it in several different cities at private screenings. And he can't wait for that because his biggest dream is to really affect how special needs and disability rights are looked at in Romania. In fact, he moved to Romania about 2 years ago now, And his plan was to be there for 2 years while Dave and I were finishing up the film. And then he couldn't find a job. And here he's a manager of a Pizza Hut. Before that, he had been a manager of a Kentucky Fried Chicken. So the man knows how to work.
Yeah.
He's very capable. But because of his limp, he literally in 4 months could not find a job in Romania. No one would hire him. So he had to come back. So,
So the stigma is still there in Romania.
yes, very much so.
Wow, after
So,
all of these years, because what is that now? That's like, well, if you looked at 1990, 35 years,
right.
and the stigma is still there.
Yes,
Wow, society sure does take a long time to change.
it does. It does. But a little film like this could really make a difference. It'll be um, a launch, something that people can come and see, not knowing that they're going to be challenged. And then after the fact, you talk to them about that. And it's a great way to try and affect societal change. I'm really
I
excited about that trip.
I love that. Now, from both of you, what message do you hope the audiences will take away with them when they see the film?
Dave, you want to go first?
Well, sure, I'll go first. It's written into the story. I want people to just to be moved by the film. I want them to have an emotional connection to the story, and then take that back into their own life of where they can have courageous kindness, do an act of kindness, because it may be something small to you today, but it could mean the world to someone else and change their world. And so that's what the movie's about, and I hope that um, it sparks that in others.
I
I
think
agree with Dave. And in addition, it was really important to us to make a movie about an orphan that an orphan could watch. There's a lot of orphan films out there that do not represent the reality of what an orphan goes through, um, or they don't take that perspective in mind when they're making the movie. And so we know that there's going to be former orphans or people who aged out, for example, aged out of foster care, people who had traumatized childhoods. And they may or may not ever call themselves an orphan, but we've had different people talk to us about how just watching this film, brought those things up to them. And so it was really important to us to present an honest picture of what that's like and where the hope lies. And so many movies present a story where an orphan just pulls himself up by his own bootstraps and goes and saves the world. Superman, for example, he never had therapy.
yeah.
Every single one of my kids had therapy.
Another another side note is that we also made a film about a human being, an adult who goes back to the scariest place of their life where all their trauma was and faces it head on. That took a lot of courage for Isidor to do that, first of all. And he went back there and faced it and settled it. And I think I hope it's healing for him. But that's really what this film is about as well. If you looked at it from a different lens, it's not about an orphan at all. About an adult who who does the healing part by facing the dragon and taking it head on.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's a big part of the messaging of the film that anyone can relate to. Anyone.
Yeah, it was something to watch Isidor walk back into those empty rooms and to see the orphanage as an adult.
Mhm.
And I can't even imagine what was going through his mind. But thank goodness for someone like Onisha that was there. Yeah, he's
Amen.
right. She's an angel.
That's right. That's right.
But this is a very, very powerful film. It is going to resonate for years to come, and it is going to change lives, not only for children, it's going to change lives for adults because it's going to inspire them to to bring these children to their own home and give them a loving environment. And ladies and gentlemen, for 24 years, Romania's dictator, Nicolae Ceausescu, pressured families to have at least 5 children in order to build his army. But when the Iron Curtain fell in 1989, the Western press found tens of thousands of maltreated children in secret government hospitals. Now, the short film Izidor gives viewers a glimpse into the life and the psyche of an institutionalized child. The stakes are high because Isidor isn't just a fictional character, but a real boy trying to determine what it means to be human. He represents not just Romania's abandoned children, but all children worldwide, everywhere. And the short film Isidor utilizes both animation and live action to give attention to the disparity between how institutionalized children experience life compared to children in families. Now, when Isidor spends a day with a family and experiences the love and connection they have, he discovers that belonging is what makes you feel alive. That very moment in time that I saw him look at his hand, when it became live action, he felt alive the moment he stepped outside the gates of that orphanage. Now, Isidor's need to belong will resonate with audiences worldwide, moving viewers to address the human rights issues still confronting orphans today. And I want to thank both of you, Dave and Sarah, for sharing Isidor with me today, and absolute much success and blessings to both of you, and may the film's powerful message again resonate with the global audience.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be
Thank you,
here.
Ward.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, when you attend a film festival, regardless if it's here in the US or abroad, and Isidor is there. And for all of you film festival, directors, you need to bring Isidor into your film festival. It's 30 minutes long, but don't let that shy you away from a film that changes lives. And that's what film is about. Film, it's storytelling that changes lives and allows us to see, well, in areas that maybe we could be the helping hand that person needs. So I want to thank all of you for watching and listening. And so please visit us at bondoncinema.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to check out our Bond on Cinema Prime show. So as for me, you're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.